The chalk dust hung in the afternoon light like tiny prayers suspended in air. I stood at the front of my classroom, watching 23 pairs of eyes watch me back. Some curious, some bored, most just tired. These kids deserved better than crumbling walls and outdated textbooks held together with tape and hope. They deserved better than me standing here pretending I had answers when the truth was I barely had questions left to ask. "Miss Carter?" Lily's small voice cut through my thoughts. "Is it true? That the school's closing?" The silence that followed was suffocating. I'd practiced this moment in my head a dozen times, rehearsed gentle words that would soften the blow. But when I opened my mouth, all that came out was the truth. "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I promise I'm going to fight for you. All of you." The bell rang sharp, final, unforgiving. As my students filed out, their backpacks heavy with dreams they didn't know were threatened, I caught Mrs. Henderson's eye through the doorway. Our principal looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past month. She didn't have to say anything. The board meeting hadn't gone well. I gathered my papers slowly, letting the empty classroom settle around me like a familiar coat. 5 years I'd been here. 5 years of believing that education could change lives, that passion could overcome budgets, that love could fill the gaps where resources failed. How naive, how beautifully, devastatingly naive. Through the window, I noticed a car I'd never seen before, sleek, black, expensive in a way that didn't belong in our neighborhood. Someone sat in the driver's seat, but the tinted windows kept their face hidden. Something about the way the vehicle idled there, patient and predatory, made the hair on my arms stand up. I was still staring when Mrs. Henderson knocked softly. "Emma, the board made their decision. We have 2 weeks. After that." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. 2 weeks to save a lag. School. 2 weeks to protect 23 futures. 2 weeks before I became just another idealist who'd failed the children who needed her most. I grabbed my coat and walked out into the autumn cold, my breath forming clouds that disappeared before they could become anything real. The black car was still there. As I passed, the engine purred to life, and for just a moment, I saw him, a man in the driver's seat, his eyes following me with an intensity that felt like being studied under glass. Then he was gone, merging into traffic, leaving me with nothing but the unsettling feeling that my life had just been measured and found wanting. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived the next afternoon, still reeling from a morning spent calling donors who'd stopped returning my emails months ago. The message had come through my school account, *, regarding Street Catherine's funding situation. "Can we talk? M. Black, *. No phone number, no company name, just a time and place, and the kind of confidence that assumed I'd show up. I almost didn't. Almost walked past the cafe, almost went home to grade papers and pretend that mysterious benefactors actually existed outside of fairy tales. But desperation makes you do foolish things. Desperation makes you walk through glass doors into warm spaces that smell like coffee and cinnamon and possibility. He sat in the corner booth, and I recognized him immediately. The man from the car. Up close, he was devastating in a way that felt dangerous, sharp jawline, dark hair styled with casual precision, eyes that seemed to calculate the exact value of your soul while offering to buy it. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, and when he stood to greet me, every movement spoke of controlled power. "Miss Carter, thank you for coming." His voice was smooth, cultured, with an edge that suggested he wasn't used to being refused. "You said this was about the school." I remained standing, my purse clutched like a shield. "I'm listening." A slight smile touched his lips. Direct. "I appreciate that. Please, sit." I sat, but only because my legs suddenly felt unsteady. He signaled the waitress, ordered 2 coffees without asking what I wanted, and leaned back with the ease of someone who owned every room he entered. "Your school needs $300,000 to avoid closure. The building needs repairs, the district needs proof of sustainable funding, and you need all of it in 14 days. He stated it like reading a grocery list. "I can provide that." My heart stopped. "Why would you?" "In exchange for a very simple arrangement." He slid a folder across the table. "Marry me." The cafe seemed to tilt. Somewhere, a spoon clattered against porcelain. The hiss of the espresso machine became the loudest sound in the universe. "I'm sorry, what?" "A marriage. Legal, binding, but temporary. 6 months, perhaps a year. Long enough to satisfy certain requirements in my business affairs. In return, your school receives full funding, no strings attached beyond our agreement." I should have stood up. Should have thrown the coffee in his face or called him insane, or at least had the dignity to storm out dramatically. Instead, I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, transfer authorizations, legal documents that looked horrifyingly legitimate. The numbers swam before my eyes, not just 300,000, but provisions for teachers' salaries, equipment upgrades, scholarship funds. "This is insane," I whispered. "This is business, Miss Carter. I need a wife for personal reasons I'm not at liberty to discuss. You need money your government and community have failed to provide. Both problems solve each other rather elegantly. I don't even know you. And yet you came here because your students matter more than your pride." He leaned forward, and I caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker, smoke, perhaps, or secrets. "I'm offering you a choice. Walk away and watch Street Catherine's close its doors forever. Or sign a piece of paper and save 23 futures. What's more insane, my proposal or a system that forces you to make it?" The worst part was he was right. The absolute worst part was that sitting across from this stranger with his impossible offer and his predatory confidence, I felt the first flicker of hope I'd experienced in months. And hope, I was learning, was more dangerous than any contract. "Why me?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "You could buy a wife. Someone sophisticated. Someone who fits your world." Something flickered in his eyes, pain, maybe, or memory. "I don't want someone who fits my world, Miss Carter. I want someone who reminds me there are still people in it worth protecting." The coffee arrived. He added sugar to mine without asking, somehow knowing exactly how I took it. That small gesture of knowledge felt more intimate than anything else that had happened, more terrifying than the proposal itself. I would need guarantees, I heard myself say. Legal protections, evidence that the money is legitimate. Of course. My attorney will draw up a contract that protects both parties. You'll have complete financial independence, separate living arrangements if you prefer, and an exit clause with no penalties after our minimum term. He pulled out a business card, heavy stock, embossed lettering. "Think about it. You have 48 hours. He stood to leave, but I grabbed his wrist before I could stop myself. His skin was warm under my fingers, and I felt his pulse jump at the contact. "What's your first name? Your real first name?" For a moment, the mask slipped. He looked almost human, almost vulnerable. "Damien, Damien," I repeated, testing how it felt in my mouth. "If I do this, if you need to promise me something, whatever your reasons, whatever your world is like, it doesn't touch my students. Ever." His hand covered mine, and when he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. "You have my word, Emma. Your students will be protected." He left me sitting there with cold coffee and a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Through the window, I watched him climb into that black car and disappear into the city traffic. Only then did I notice the small detail I'd missed before: the ring he wore on his right hand, heavy gold with an engraved crest that looked like it belonged to another century, another world. I turned the business card over. On the back, written in elegant script, *, "You'll thank me later." *, the courthouse smelled like old paper and broken promises. I stood in front of a bored clerk who'd probably seen 100 marriages that week and would see 100 more, each one just as temporary and transactional as mine. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made the whole situation feel surreal. Damien stood beside me in a charcoal suit, looking devastatingly calm. No family in the pews, no flowers, no music. Just two strangers. A witness I'd never met. A stone-faced man who stood by the door like a sentinel, and a judge who read the vows with the enthusiasm of someone reciting a grocery list. "Do you, Emma Catherine Carter, take this man?" The words washed over me. I'd signed the contract 2 nights ago, after reading it 17 times and calling a lawyer friend who'd confirmed it was, impossibly, legitimate, and weighted heavily in my favor. The money had already been transferred to the school's account. Mrs. Henderson had called me, crying tears of joy and disbelief. My students would be safe. All it cost was this moment, this lie, this ring sliding onto my finger with surprising warmth. "I do," I whispered, and felt the door close on my old life. "Do you, Damien Matthias Black, take this woman?" I risked a glance at him. His jaw was set, his eyes forward, but his hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he reached for my fingers. Something about that tiny crack in his composure made this whole thing worse. made it feel less like a business transaction and more like a betrayal of something sacred neither of us believed in anymore. I do. The judge pronounced us married with all the ceremony of someone approving a parking permit. No kiss, no applause, just Damien's hand on the small of my back guiding me toward the exit. The witness, his bodyguard, I realized with creeping dread, handed him a small box. Inside was another ring, this one clearly antique, with a stone that caught the ugly fluorescent light and turned it into something almost beautiful. Family heirloom, Damien murmured, sliding it on next to the simple band. For appearances. Your family knows about this? The thought made my stomach drop. His expression shuddered completely. My family will know what I tell them to know. Outside, the armored car waited. Not the sleek sedan from before, but something larger, heavier, with windows so tinted they looked black. The bodyguard opened the door, and I hesitated on the threshold between my old world and whatever lay beyond that leather interior. Mrs. Black, the bodyguard said softly, and I realized he wasn't being formal. He was reminding me. This was my name now, my identity, my cage. I climbed inside. Damien followed, maintaining a careful distance on the seat. As we pulled away from the courthouse, away from everything familiar, I watched the city I'd known transform into something foreign. We drove through neighborhoods I'd never visited, past restaurants I couldn't afford, toward streets where the trees were taller, and the silence more expensive. I kept my apartment, I said, desperate to fill the suffocating quiet. The contract said I could maintain separate residence. You can. But tonight, you need to be seen arriving at the estate. Appearances matter in my world, Emma. First impressions most of all. Your world, I echoed bitterly. What exactly is your world, Damien? He turned to look at me then. Really look at me. And I saw something in his eyes that made my breath catch. Not cruelty, not indifference, but a deep, exhausted sadness that seemed carved into his bones. You'll see soon enough. And when you do, remember you chose this. The car turned onto a private road. Trees formed a canopy overhead, their branches interlocking like clasped hands or prison bars. Through the windshield, I caught my first glimpse of the mansion, and my mouth went dry. It looked like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and shadow, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. Lights glowed in windows that seemed too numerous to count. The ground stretched endlessly in every direction, manicured lawns giving way to dark forests that pressed in like they were trying to reclaim the space. Welcome home, Mrs. Black, the bodyguard said again, and this time it sounded like a warning. The gate closed behind us with a clang that echoed like a cell door slamming shut. I glanced back and saw the security cameras tracking our approach, their red lights blinking like the eyes of watchful predators. The fairy tale I'd stepped into had teeth, and I was just beginning to realize how sharp they were. Damien helped me from the car, his hand impersonal on my elbow. The front door opened before we reached it, revealing a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. Margaret, this is my wife, Emma. Please help her get settled in the East Wing. Wife. The word hung in the air between us, more intimate than anything else that had passed his lips. I wanted to correct him, to remind him this was temporary, a contract, a business arrangement. But the way Margaret looked at me assessing, calculating, already cataloging my inadequacies made me swallow the words. Of course, Mr. Black. This way, ma'am. I followed her through hallways, lined with art that probably cost more than my entire education. The floors were marble, the ceilings vaulted, the silence broken only by the click of her sensible shoes and my racing heartbeat. Servants appeared and disappeared like ghosts, their eyes carefully averted, their movements practiced and precise. The East Wing turned out to be a suite larger than my entire apartment bedroom, sitting room, private bath with a tub that could fit 3 people. Margaret showed me the closet, already stocked with clothes in exactly my size, tags still attached. Mr. Black arranged these after reviewing your measurements from the fitting last week, she said matter-of-factly, as if this were normal, as if I should be grateful rather than deeply unsettled. How did I never went to a fitting? Margaret's expression didn't change. Mr. Black is very thorough in his preparations. Dinner is at 8. I'll send someone to help you dress. She left before I could protest that I knew how to dress myself. Thank you very much. Alone in this opulent prison, I sank onto the bed and tried to remember how to breathe. Through the window, I could see the ground stretching away into darkness. The forest at the edge of the property seemed to pulse with secrets. And somewhere in the distance, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A sound like fireworks, or perhaps something deadlier. Gunfire. It echoed once, twice, then faded into the night. I waited for sirens, for alarm, for someone to come running and explain, but the mansion remained perfectly quiet, perfectly calm, as if death itself were just another household detail too mundane to mention. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and wondered what I'd really signed away in that courthouse. My name, my freedom, perhaps my life. And far below, walking across the lawn with his phone to his ear, Damian Black looked up at my window. Even from this distance, I felt the weight of his gaze, protective or possessive. I couldn't tell. Maybe there was no difference. The next 3 days passed in a strange blur of luxury and isolation. I woke in silk sheets and ate breakfast prepared by a chef whose name I wasn't important enough to know. I tried to return to Street Catherine's to check on my students, but a polite bodyguard informed me that Mr. Black prefers you remain on the estate while you adjust. Prisoner, then. That's what I was, regardless of how golden the cage. On the 4th morning, Margaret knocked precisely at 9. Mr. Black requests your presence in the ballroom. Your etiquette instructor is waiting. My what? You'll need to attend certain events as Mrs. Black. This requires preparation. The ballroom was absurd. Crystal chandeliers, polished floors that reflected light like water, walls lined with mirrors that showed me 1,000 versions of myself, all looking equally lost. A woman waited in the center, her posture so perfect it looked painful. Mrs. Black, I'm Vivienne. I'll be teaching you how to navigate your husband's social circles. She looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. We have a great deal of work to do. For the next 4 hours, she taught me which fork to use, how to hold a wine glass, how to enter a room so that every eye turned without seeming to try. She corrected my posture, my smile, my handshake. Every correction felt like a small erasure, a piece of Emma Carter being sanded away to make room for Mrs. Damian Black. You must understand, Vivienne said as she adjusted my shoulders for the 100th time. The women in Mr. Black's world are not simply decorative. They are symbols of power, reflections of their husband's status. Any weakness you show becomes his weakness. Any mistake you make becomes his mistake. What happens if I make a mistake? Her smile was thin and sharp. Let's hope we never find out. During a break, I noticed one of the guards standing by the door, shifting nervously. His hand kept moving to his side, where I could see the outline of a weapon beneath his jacket. When Vivienne wasn't looking, I caught his eye. Are you okay? He looked startled that I'd spoken to him. Yes, ma'am. We had some trouble last night. Nothing you need to worry about. What kind of trouble? His eyes darted to Vivienne, then back to me. The kind Mr. Black handles personally, ma'am. Before I could ask more, Damian himself appeared in the doorway, and the entire atmosphere shifted. The guard straightened. Vivienne practically curtsied. Even the light seemed to bend toward him. How is my wife's progress? He directed the question to Vivienne but kept his eyes on me. She's a quick study, Mr. Black. Rough edges, certainly, but nothing that can't be refined. Good. Leave us. Vivienne gathered her materials and swept out, the guard following. Suddenly, it was just the two of us in this cavernous room, surrounded by mirrors that showed us from every angle a beautiful couple that was entirely a lie. Damian walked toward me slowly, his footsteps echoing. He'd shed his jacket somewhere, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and scattered with scars. Old scars, the kind that told stories of survival rather than accident. You don't have to do this, I said, gesturing to the empty ballroom, the abandoned etiquette lesson. I can play the part without being rebuilt from scratch. Can you? He stopped just close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. Can you stand in a room full of predators and convince them you belong there? Can you smile while they circle you, looking for weaknesses? Can you lie with your entire body for hours at a time without breaking? Is that what you do? Something flickered across his face, recognition, perhaps, or respect for the question. Every single day. He reached out and took my hand, examining it like a curious artifact. His thumb traced the callus on my index finger where I held chalk, the ink stain on my middle finger from grading papers without a cap on my pen. Evidence of my real life, my real work. These hands have built something beautiful, he murmured. They've shaped minds, offered hope, created futures. My hands. He turned his own palms up, and I saw more scars, a network of silver lines that spoke of violence I couldn't imagine. My hands destroy. They take. They end. Then why save my school? Why do something good if you believe you're only capable of destruction? He released my hand like it burned him, because for one moment, I wanted to remember what it felt like to build instead of break. Because watching you fight for those kids reminded me that people like you still exist. Because I'm a selfish bastard who wanted to own something beautiful, even if it's just for a little while. The honesty was more frightening than any lie could have been. I understood then that this wasn't just a business arrangement for him. It was something desperate, something dangerous, something I couldn't begin to untangle. What did you do, Damien, to get those scars? His smile was terrible. Terrible things for good reasons. Or maybe good things for terrible reasons. I've been doing it so long I can't tell the difference anymore. He turned to leave, but I grabbed his arm. The muscle tensed beneath my fingers, coiled and ready. And I realized how carefully he controlled himself around me, how much strength he kept leashed. Why are there guards everywhere? Why did I hear gunfire that first night? What exactly am I involved in? For a long moment, he just looked at me, weighing options I couldn't see. Then he leaned close, his breath warm against my ear, his voice dropping to something intimate and terrible. You're involved with me, Emma, and that's the most dangerous place you could possibly be. He pulled away, leaving me standing alone in that ballroom with 1,000 reflected versions of myself, all of them looking lost. That night, I couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet, my mind too loud with questions that had no safe answers. Around midnight, I gave up and decided to explore the mansion. If I was going to be imprisoned here, I might as well learn the layout of my cage. The hallways were darker at night, lit by sconces that cast more shadow than light. I passed room after room, sitting rooms, parlors, spaces designed for entertaining people I would never meet. Everything was beautiful and cold and perfectly curated, like a museum of wealth with no actual life inside it. I was about to turn back when I noticed a light under a door at the end of the hall. The library, according to the mental map I'd been building. I pushed it open slowly, expecting to find Damien working late. Instead, I found myself alone among floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with books that actually looked red, worn spines, cracked leather, marginalia in the pages I could see from where I stood. A fire crackled in an enormous fireplace, and there, on the desk, illuminated by a banker's lamp, were papers that made my heart stop. Financial records, transfer documents, names I didn't recognize connected to numbers that made no sense. But there, buried in the middle of one ledger, I saw it. Street. Catherine's school listed alongside companies with words like import, export, security consulting, asset management, the kind of vague corporate speak that could mean anything or nothing. And next to Street Catherine's, in a column labeled Operation Type, one word, laundering. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. My school, my students. The money that had saved us was dirty. I was complicit in something criminal, something that could destroy not just me but everyone I'd fought to protect. Interesting reading? I spun around so fast I knocked papers onto the floor. Damien stood in the doorway, still dressed despite the late hour, his expression unreadable. What is this? My voice came out higher than I intended, edged with panic. Is this what I think it is? He closed the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a trap closing. That depends on what you think it is. Money laundering. Criminal activity. You're using my school to... I couldn't even finish the sentence, the implications too horrifying. To legitimize certain funds, yes. He said it calmly, like admitting he'd used my coffee mug without asking. Among other ventures. Did you think $300,000 appeared from nowhere? That money has to come from somewhere, Emma. It has to flow through legitimate channels. So you made my school part of your criminal empire? You made me complicit in... Anger choked the words off. I wanted to hit him, to scream, to tear apart this beautiful library and his beautiful face and every beautiful lie he'd built. I saved your school, he corrected, his voice hardening, with money that, yes, comes from enterprises you would find distasteful. But those children have new books now. They have heat in winter and teachers who can afford to stay. They have a future because I gave them one. Does it matter where the money came from? Yes, of course it matters. If this gets out, if anyone discovers... No one will discover it. I'm very good at what I do, Emma. These records exist in my private library because they're completely secure. The only way anyone learns about this is if you tell them." The threat was implicit but clear. I backed away until my spine hit the bookshelf. "What are you, a criminal?" A businessman operating in spaces your government prefers to pretend don't exist." He moved closer, and I saw weariness in his eyes, the kind that came from years of carrying weight he couldn't share. "Do you want to know the truth? The whole truth?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "My family controls one of the largest criminal organizations on the Eastern Seaboard. Drugs, weapons, gambling, the usual sins people can't help but commit. I inherited this empire when I was 23, after my father was murdered, and my mother died of heartbreak 6 months later. I've spent the last 10 years trying to legitimize our holdings, to transition from violence to legitimate business. But you can't leave this world cleanly. There's always blood on your hands, always debts that need paying. And I'm what, your redemption? Your good deed for the year? You're the first genuinely decent person I've met in a decade who looked at me like I was human instead of a monster. You're proof that not everything I touch turns to poison." His voice dropped, raw with something that sounded dangerously close to pain. "You're my reminder that there are still things in this world worth protecting, even if I'm not worthy of protecting them." I wanted to hate him, wanted to take this truth and use it as armor against whatever I was starting to feel when he looked at me like that, vulnerable and fierce and achingly alone. But all I felt was a terrible understanding, a recognition that we were both trapped by circumstances we couldn't control. If someone finds out, they won't. I've insulated you completely. The money trail is clean on your end. If everything falls apart, you walk away untouched. That was part of my planning from the beginning. Why would you do that? Why protect me if I'm just a business arrangement?" He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and touched my cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible from hands that had admittedly destroyed. "Because you matter, Emma Carter. You matter in a world that taught me most people don't." His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and every trace of vulnerability vanished, replaced by something cold and lethal. "You need to go back to your room. Now." "What's wrong?" "Nothing you need to worry about. Margaret will bring you breakfast in the morning. Don't leave your wing tonight, no matter what you hear." "Damien, please." The word seemed to cost him. "Trust me enough to do this one thing." I fled back to my room, my mind reeling from everything I'd learned. As I locked the door behind me, useless gesture. Since I was sure he had keys to everything, I heard voices in the hallway below. Angry voices. Then the sound of car doors, engines, tires on gravel, and later, much later, what might have been a scream cut short by something I didn't want to imagine. I pressed my pillow over my head and tried to remember who I'd been a week ago. A teacher, an idealist, someone who believed the world divided neatly into good and evil, with clear lines that should never be crossed. That Emma Carter was gone, and I wasn't sure what I was becoming in her place. Morning brought a news alert that made everything worse. I was eating breakfast alone, as always, when my phone lit up with a notification. ***, breaking. Gang violence targets school bus in East District. ***. My hands shook as I opened the article. Street. Catherine's. My school. Someone had fired shots at a bus carrying middle schoolers yesterday afternoon. No one was hurt, thank God, but the children were traumatized, parents were furious, and police were investigating gang retaliation related to recent territory disputes. I didn't need to read between the lines. Someone had targeted my students to send a message to Damien. My presence in his life, my school's connection to his money, it had painted targets on the backs of children. I was out of my room and down the stairs before I consciously decided to move. I found Damien in what Margaret called his study, a windowless room with monitors showing security feeds from what looked like a dozen different locations. He was on the phone, his voice low and dangerous, but he ended the call when I burst in. "Emma, I told you to stay. My students were attacked. Children were shot at because of you, because of me, because of this." I gestured wildly at the room, the monitors, the evidence of his surveillance and control. "I want out. The contract is void. I'm done. You can't leave. Watch me." I turned to go, but he was faster, his hand closing around my wrist, not painfully, but with enough strength to stop me cold. "You think walking away makes you safe? You think it makes them safe? You're my wife now, Emma." That doesn't change just because you tear up a piece of paper. Everyone who wants to hurt me knows your name, your face, where you work, who you care about. Leaving doesn't erase that. It just means you face it without my protection. Your protection? I laughed, the sound bitter and broken. Your protection is what put them in danger in the first place. No. His voice turned to steel. Existing in a world where men like me operate put them in danger. I'm just the most recent reminder of that reality. Those children were always vulnerable to violence because your government underfunds their schools, your society undervalues their lives, and your precious, legitimate world doesn't care if they live or die. At least I'm trying to give them a fighting chance. By making them pawns in whatever war you're fighting? By making sure they have a school, Emma. He released my wrist and ran his hands through his hair, frustration cracking through his control. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to drag you into the crossfire? I was trying to do something good, something clean, and even that turned toxic because that's what I do, I ruin things. Silence fell between us, heavy and suffocating. On the monitors behind him, I could see different views of the mansion, the grounds, the gate. One screen showed street, Catherine's, and I realized with creeping horror that he'd been watching my school even before I married him. Protecting it, maybe, or studying it. Probably both. Was any of it real? The question escaped before I could stop it. The wedding, the contract, this. I gestured between us. Was any of it about redemption, or was I just a convenient shield? He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant he decided to tell me the truth instead of another beautiful lie. It started as convenience. I needed a wife for inheritance purposes, family bylaws that require the heir to be married before 35, old-fashioned rules that can't be changed. I'd planned to hire someone discreet, professional. Then I saw you fighting for your school, saw the way you looked at those kids like they were worth dying for, and I thought. He paused, swallowing hard. I thought maybe being near someone that good might make me less terrible. Maybe some of your light would rub off on me. Selfish, right? And now? Now I'm in too deep. Now you're in too deep. Now we either survive this together or we both drown, and I'm not sure which scares me more. His phone buzzed again, a different tone, urgent and sharp. He glanced at it and cursed softly. I have to go. My men are moving your students and their families to secure locations until the immediate threat passes. The school will be guarded around the clock. And you, he paused at the door, his back to me. You stay here where I know you're safe. That's not a request. I can't just hide while they're scared. You can and you will, because if they take you, Emma, there's no limit to what I'll do to get you back. And that kind of violence. His voice broke slightly. That's not something the world needs to see. He left me standing there among his monitors and secrets, surrounded by views of a world I'd been naive enough to think I understood. On one screen, I watched a black SUV pull up to Street Catherine's. Men in suits. Damien's men took positions around the building, protecting it, claiming it, making it a fortress whether I wanted one or not. I sank into his chair and let myself cry for the first time since this nightmare began. For my students, for my lost innocence, for the man I'd married who looked at me like I was salvation when I couldn't even save myself. And somewhere in the city, violence was being done in my name. Debts were being paid in blood. Children were learning that the world was darker than any storybook told them. All because I'd been desperate enough to marry a stranger. The days that followed felt like living in beautiful purgatory. I wasn't allowed to leave the mansion for your safety, Mrs. Black, but I wasn't technically a prisoner. I could roam the grounds, use the library, swim in the Olympic-sized pool I discovered in the East Wing. I just couldn't leave. Couldn't see my students. Couldn't verify that they were actually okay beyond the brief updates Margaret delivered with my meals. The children are safe. Mr. Black has ensured their protection. Mr. Black's men are maintaining security at the school. Mr. Black will speak with you when he returns. Mr. Black. Never Damien. Not anymore. He'd retreated behind that formal wall, becoming the mysterious stranger I'd married instead of the broken man I'd glimpsed in the library. A week into my captivity, because that's what it was. Regardless of the silk sheets and gourmet meals, I decided I was done waiting for permission to live. I walked to the front door where a guard I'd seen dozens of times stood at attention. I need to go out. Just for an hour. I'm going insane in here. I'm sorry, Mrs. Black. Mr. Black has ordered. I don't care what Mr. Black ordered. I'm a grown woman, not a child. Let me out. He didn't budge. It's for your protection, ma'am. I'll take my chances. With respect, ma'am, you don't understand the current situation. There are threats. Then send guards with me. Send an army if you have to. But I'm not spending another day in this golden cage pretending I'm here by choice. He spoke into his radio, rapid-fire communication I couldn't follow. After a moment, he looked uncomfortable. Mister, Black says if you attempt to leave, I'm to escort you back to your suite and post guards outside. So I am a prisoner. You're protected, ma'am. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. I turned and walked back through the mansion, my anger building with each step. My suite, my cage. I slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame, and immediately regretted it when I heard footsteps outside the guards, taking their positions, boxing me in. I looked around at the beautiful room that had become my prison. The closet full of clothes I hadn't chosen, the books I hadn't selected, the window that showed me a world I couldn't touch, everything designed to keep me comfortable and controlled. On the desk, hotel stationery embossed with Damien's family crest mocked me. I grabbed a piece and started writing without thinking, my hand moving faster than my mind. Asterisk. Dear Lily. Asterisk asterisk. I'm sorry, I haven't been at school. I'm safe, but I need you to know that everything I did for you and your classmates. Sometimes adults make choices that are hard to understand. Choices that look selfish but come from love. Asterisk. I filled 3 pages, then 5, then 10. Letters to all my students, trying to explain the unexplainable, trying to protect them from a truth they were too young to carry, trying to apologize for bringing danger to their lives while pretending it was noble sacrifice. When I finally stopped, my hand cramping and my eyes blurred with tears, the sun was setting. The room had grown dark around me, and sitting in the chair by the door, so still I hadn't noticed him enter, was Damien. How long have you been there? Long enough. He stood slowly, moving into the lamplight. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, his shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. You want to see them? Of course I want to see them. They're my students. My responsibility. They're my responsibility now too. He said it quietly but firmly. Whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, your students became mine the day you married me. That's not how it works. That's exactly how it works in my world, Emma. You should understand that by now. He crossed to the window, looking out at the grounds where darkness was settling like a blanket. In the distance, I could see the lights of his security team patrolling the perimeter. There's a council meeting tomorrow night, he said finally. The heads of the 5 families that control this region. They're gathering to discuss territory, tribute, the usual business, and to meet my new wife. No, you don't have a choice. They already know about you. If you don't appear, it's an insult, a sign of weakness. And in my world, weakness gets people killed. Then let them think I'm weak. Let them think whatever they want. I'm not going to play dress up and pretend I belong in your, they're the ones who ordered the attack on your school. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled back a step. What? Not all of them. But some. Certain members of the council saw my marriage as a distraction, a liability. They wanted to remind me that emotional attachments have consequences. His reflection in the window looked haunted. The attack was a warning. Next time it won't be warning shots. So you want me to meet them? Shake hands with people who tried to murder children? I want you to show them you're not afraid. I want you to stand beside me and prove that being my wife doesn't make you a target, it makes you untouchable. Because if you look weak, if they think they can use you against me, then everyone you care about becomes leverage. Your students, your friends, your former colleagues, everyone. The calculation was brutal and terrifyingly logical. In trying to protect me by hiding me away, he'd made me look like his weakness. And weakness, in his world, invited attack. I don't know how to be what you need me to be. He turned from the window, and in 2 strides he was in front of me, his hands cupping my face with surprising gentleness. You don't have to be anything but yourself. That's the point. You're a teacher who saved her school. You're someone who fights for people who can't fight for themselves. That's power, Emma. Real power, not the kind that comes from fear and violence. If you show them you're not some trophy I married but a force in your own right, they'll think twice before using you against me. And if I can't do it? If I fall apart or say the wrong thing or, you won't. Because you're the woman who walked into a cafe and agreed to marry a complete stranger to save 23 children. Because you're stronger than you know, braver than you think, and whether you believe it or not. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I saw his mask slip again, showing me the man underneath. You're the most dangerous person in this house, because you make me want to be better than I am. Damien. His phone buzzed, that urgent tone again. He checked it, and his expression shuddered instantly. I have to go. The council summons. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be difficult. He was almost to the door when I called out. What happens if I can't convince them? What happens if they decide I'm more valuable as a corpse than a queen? He paused with his hand on the doorknob, his back to me, and when he spoke, his voice carried a promise that was more terrifying than any threat. Then they learn why I'm the one sitting at the head of the table. And they learn it in ways they'll spend their last moments regretting. The door closed softly behind him, and I was alone again with my letters and my fear and the growing, horrifying realization that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being completely certain I wanted to escape. The dress Margaret brought the next evening was beautiful and intimidating, deep emerald silk that clung to curves I'd forgotten I had, with a neckline that suggested elegance rather than seduction. When I tried to refuse it, she simply laid it on the bed and said, "Mr. Black chose it himself. He said it matches your eyes." Small details like that kept undoing me. The way he noticed things, remembered things, paid attention in ways that felt intimate despite our careful distance. Vivienne appeared to do my hair and makeup, transforming me into someone I barely recognized in the mirror. She painted my lips crimson, lined my eyes with dark precision, and swept my hair into something elegant and severe. "Remember," she said as she worked, "you are not Emma Carter tonight. You are Mrs. Damien Black. You do not apologize, you do not explain, you do not show fear. You are his equal and his choice, and anyone who disrespects you disrespects him. Understood? And if someone asks why he married me, what's my story?" "The truth." She met my eyes in the mirror. "He saw something in you worth protecting. In his world, that's rarer than gold and more valuable than power." When I finally descended the main staircase, Damien was waiting in the foyer. He wore a black suit that looked like it cost more than my car, his hair swept back, his expression unreadable. But when he saw me, something flickered across his face: surprise, appreciation, and something darker that made my pulse skip. "You look," he paused, searching for words, "like you were born to this." I wasn't. I know. That's what makes it powerful. He offered his arm, and I took it, feeling the coiled strength beneath the expensive fabric. As we walked to the car, his bodyguards fell into formation around us, a moving fortress of protection that made me feel both safe and terrified. "Where is this meeting?" "A neutral location. An estate that's been used for council gatherings for 3 generations. Very formal, very old-fashioned, and very dangerous. You're really selling this." His lip quirked in something almost like a smile. "I need you prepared, not comfortable. The people you're about to meet have killed for less than a perceived insult. They respect strength and despise weakness. So whatever you do, don't show fear." Vivienne covered it. "Good. But also," he paused as we settled into the car, "stay close to me. No matter what happens, what you hear, what you see, you stay at my side." The drive took 40 minutes, winding through increasingly rural roads until we arrived at an estate that made Damien's mansion look modest. This place was a castle, actual stone walls, towers, a gate that looked like it had weathered centuries. Cars were already parked in the circular drive, each more expensive than the last. Damien helped me out, and I felt every eye in the place turn toward us. Men in dark suits, women dripping with jewelry, everyone assessing, calculating, looking for weaknesses. "Smile," Damien murmured. "You're meeting potential business partners, nothing more." Inside, the party was already underway, champagne flowing, string quartet playing, conversations conducted in low voices that stopped when we entered. An older man approached, silver-haired and distinguished, his smile showing too many teeth. "Damien, we were beginning to think you'd skip your own introduction." "Council leader Vitali. Thank you for hosting." Damien's voice was perfectly polite, but I felt the tension in his arm. "May I present my wife, Emma?" Vitali's eyes raked over me with undisguised assessment. "Charming. Though I confess, we were surprised by your sudden marriage." No engagement announcement, no proper introduction to the families. Very irregular. Love is often irregular. Damien's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on mine. I trust that won't be a problem. Of course not. Though some members of the council had questions about the timing, about whether personal attachments might interfere with family business, the threat was delicate but clear. This man, or someone like him, had ordered the attack on my school. Before Damien could respond, I heard myself speak. Questions are natural when something unexpected occurs, but I'd think experienced men like yourselves would recognize the strategic value of diversification. My background in education provides access to institutional channels that pure business rarely touches. Money laundering, for instance, works much more efficiently through charitable organizations and schools than through obvious fronts. The silence that followed my words was absolute. Damien's hand on mine went rigid. Vitali's eyes narrowed dangerously. Then he laughed a genuine surprise sound. Well, she's certainly more than decorative. Perhaps this marriage has merit after all. He moved past us to greet other guests, and Damien leaned close, his breath hot against my ear. What the hell was that? You needed me to prove I wasn't weak. I proved it. By admitting to federal crimes in front of the council? By showing them I understand the game, that I'm complicit, invested, not some innocent victim they can use as leverage. Now if they come after me, they risk exposing their own operations. Mutually assured destruction. I met his eyes, saw the shock warring with something that looked like pride or fear or both. Did I get it wrong? No, he said slowly. You got it terrifyingly right. But Emma, never do that again without warning me first. My heart can't take it. The rest of the evening blurred into a series of careful conversations and calculated revelations. I met the other council members, 4 families besides Damien's, each with their own territories and specialties. Drugs, trafficking, construction, consulting, political influence. They spoke about it all obliquely, in euphemisms and metaphors, but the meaning was clear. I stood at Damien's side and played my part. Mrs. Black, the educated wife who brought legitimacy and access, the acceptable face of acceptable crime. I smiled and sipped champagne I didn't taste, and felt myself becoming something I didn't recognize. Around midnight, Damien excused us and led me onto a balcony that overlooked dark gardens. The night air was cool against my flushed skin. You did well. Better than well. He loosened his tie, and I saw how exhausted he was beneath the mask. Vitali will report back to the others that you're an asset, not a liability. The threat level against your school should decrease significantly. Should? Nothing's certain in this life. But you've bought us breathing room. Us. When had we become an us? Damien. Earlier when I mentioned the money laundering, I wasn't just making conversation. Is that why you really chose Street Catherine's? Because it was vulnerable enough to use? He was quiet for a long time, his hands gripping the balcony railing. Initially, yes. The school was perfect for what I needed. But then I saw you, and the plan changed. I wanted to help. I wanted to be better. Maybe those motivations can coexist. Can they? Can you launder dirty money through my school and still pretend you're saving it? The money rebuilds classrooms either way. The kids learn either way. Does the source matter if the outcome is good? Yes, I said firmly. Intent matters. Truth matters. Then I'm afraid we're at an impasse. Because in my world, results are the only thing that matters. Good intentions get you killed. His phone buzzed again, but this time when he looked at the message, his entire body went rigid. The color drained from his face. What? What's wrong? We need to leave. Now. He grabbed my hand and pulled me back through the party, moving fast enough that people turned to stare. His bodyguards materialized from the shadows, falling into protective formation. Damien, tell me what's happening. They're moving against me, tonight, while we're here. He was on his phone as we rushed to the car. How many? Where? God damn it. I told you to maintain double coverage. We were speeding away from the estate before I could process what was happening. Through the window, I saw other cars following, whether ours or theirs. I couldn't tell. Someone's attacking the mansion? I asked. Not the mansion. Your school. My heart stopped. What? Vitali. He decided your usefulness didn't outweigh your value as a target. He's holding Street Catherine's hostage. If I don't surrender control of my territories by dawn, he starts executing students on live television. The world tilted. This was my fault. My existence, my marriage, my complicity in Damien's world, it had painted targets on innocent children. Call the police, call the FBI, call, and tell them what? That a Mafia Don is holding a school hostage because of territory disputes? They'll storm the building and get everyone killed. My only chance is to negotiate directly. Then do it. Give him whatever he wants. It's not about territories, Emma. It's about power. If I give in to this, every family in the region will know I can be controlled through emotional attachments. They'll use it again and again until I'm dead or powerless. So what are you going to do? His expression, illuminated by the passing streetlights, was terrible to behold. Cold, calculating, everything human stripped away, until only the monster remained. I'm going to make an example of Vitaly so complete, so brutal, that no one ever threatens what's mine again. And my students will be freed. I promise you that. What do you want me to do? He looked at me then, and I saw the agony beneath his fury. Nothing. You've done enough. This is my world, my mess, my responsibility to clean up. We arrived at a warehouse I didn't recognize, somewhere industrial, dark, far from anything residential. His men were already there, a small army assembling with terrifying efficiency. Weapons, vehicles, communication equipment, all preparing for war. Damien helped me from the car and led me to a back office with monitors showing feeds from Street Catherine's. I could see my students huddled in the gymnasium, surrounded by armed men, see the terror on their young faces, see Vitaly himself standing on the stage, gun in hand, enjoying his moment of power. Stay here, Damien ordered. Don't leave this room. Don't try to help. Promise me. I can't just... Promise me, Emma. Because if you get hurt, if you die, I won't stop with Vitaly. I'll burn this entire city to the ground, and every drop of blood spilled will be on your conscience. The raw honesty of it shocked me. He meant it. Completely. I promise. He kissed my forehead, brief, almost brotherly, but his hands shook as he pulled away. Then he was gone, and I was alone with the monitors, and my guilt, and the terrible certainty that this night would change everything. I watched the feeds, unable to look away. Watched Damien and his men approach the school with military precision. Watched the negotiations begin tense. Conversations conducted through phones and intermediaries. Watched Vitaly's growing frustration as his demands went unmet. Then I watched it all go to hell. Gunfire erupted suddenly, not from Damien's men, but from a third party. The police, arriving despite orders to stay away. Or maybe another family, seeing an opportunity in the chaos. The feeds showed students screaming, teachers trying to shield them, Vitaly's men returning fire. And through it all, Damien moved like death itself, precise, relentless, absolutely focused on getting to that gymnasium. A new message appeared on my phone. Asterisk. Come alone to the north entrance if you want this to end. Your life for theirs. You have 5 minutes. V times. My hands shook as I read it. This was always the plan. Not territory, not power me. They'd used my students as bait to draw me out, knowing Damien would never trade me, but betting I'd trade myself. I looked at the monitors, saw my students, saw the terror that I'd caused. Then I stood up and walked out of that office, past the guards too busy monitoring the situation to notice one woman leaving, through the warehouse and out into the night. The school was only 10 blocks away. I ran the entire distance in my ridiculous heels, my expensive dress tearing on chain-link fences and catching on branches. My phone buzzed constantly. Damien, his guards, everyone realizing I'd left. I turned it off. The north entrance was dark, but I could see figures moving in the shadows. As I approached, hands grabbed me from behind, zip-tying my wrists and covering my mouth before I could scream. They dragged me inside, through familiar hallways now pocked with bullet holes, past classrooms I'd taught in, toward the gymnasium where the sound of gunfire had finally stopped. Vitaly waited on the stage, looking far less composed than he had at the party. Blood stained his shoulder. Someone had grazed him. His eyes lit up when he saw me. Perfect. The sacrificial lamb arrives. He grabbed my arm and pulled me in front of him, gun to my temple. Tell your husband to stand down or I paint the floor with your very educated brains. From the other side of the gymnasium, Damien stood frozen, his weapon still raised, his face a mask of fury and fear. Our eyes met across that space, and I tried to tell him with that look everything I couldn't say. I'm sorry. Thank you. This isn't your fault. Be better than this moment. Let them go, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. The students, the teachers. Let them walk out, and you can do whatever you want with me. I don't think you're in a position to negotiate, sweetheart. Actually, she is. Damien's voice cut across the space like a blade, because the moment you pull that trigger, every man in this room shoots you. You'll die regardless of whether she does. But if you let her go, let everyone go, I'll let you walk out of here. You leave the city, retire to somewhere quiet, and we pretend this never happened. You expect me to believe you'll let me just walk away? No. Damien's smile was terrible. But I expect you to realize it's your only chance at dying of old age instead of in the next 30 seconds. Vitali's hand trembled against my temple. He was calculating odds, running scenarios, trying to find an angle that didn't end with him dead. Drop your weapons, he demanded. All of you. Then maybe. He didn't finish the sentence. I felt his grip loosen slightly, distracted by something behind Damien. I used that split second to drop my full weight downward, pulling free of his grasp as I fell. Gunfire exploded around me. I hit the floor hard, my head cracking against polished wood, and everything went fuzzy. Through the haze, I saw Damien running toward me, saw his men swarming the stage, saw Vitali falling. Then everything went black. I woke in a hospital room to the sound of machines beeping and low voices arguing. My head throbbed, and when I tried to sit up, a gentle hand pressed me back down. Easy. You have a concussion. Damien's voice, rough with exhaustion. I blinked until he came into focus. He sat beside my bed, still in his torn, blood-stained clothes from the raid. His face was haggard, but his eyes were fierce as they scanned me for damage. The students? Safe. All of them. Some traumatized but physically unharmed. Teachers too. Vitali? Dead. Along with 4 of his men and 2 police officers who got caught in the crossfire. He said it flatly, without emotion. It's a mess. Federal investigation, media circus, the whole nightmare. But your students are safe. Relief and guilt warred in my chest. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gone. I just couldn't. You saved them. His hand found mine, lacing our fingers together. If you hadn't drawn Vitali's attention, given my men the opening, we'd have lost kids. What you did was stupid and reckless and incredibly brave, and I'm furious with you and so goddamn grateful I can barely breathe. What happens now? Now you recover. The school stays closed for a few weeks while investigators process the scene and counselors work with the students. Your board has already announced you'll return as head administrator with full support. And us? He looked at our joined hands, and I saw something break behind his eyes. That's up to you. The contract is fulfilled. You can walk away with your money, your school, your freedom. No one will blame you. No one will follow you. You'll be safe. And if I don't want to walk away? His head snapped up, hope and fear warring on his face. Then you're insane. You should run as far and fast as you can from me and everything I represent. Probably. I squeezed his hand, feeling the scars I'd memorized through countless careful glances. But somewhere between the courthouse and tonight, something changed. I stopped seeing just the monster and started seeing the man underneath. The one who saved a school he had no reason to care about. The one who protected children who weren't his responsibility. The one who traded his empire for a chance to do something good. I'm not good, Emma. Tonight proved that. I killed 3 men without hesitation. I would have killed a dozen more if it meant getting you back. I know. And I should be terrified of that. Should pack my things and never look back. I paused, finally admitting the truth I'd been avoiding. But I'm not ready to leave yet. Maybe that makes me complicit. Maybe it makes me as corrupt as your world. But I need to see where this goes. He closed his eyes, and I saw a tear escape down his cheek, the first crack in his armor since I'd met him. You're going to be the death of me. Or your salvation. Either way, we'll find out together. He leaned forward and kissed me, then not the careful, distant kiss of a contract husband, but something desperate and real, and full of promises neither of us could keep. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. I don't deserve you. No, I agreed. But I'm choosing you anyway. We'll both have to live with that. The next 6 weeks passed in a strange kind of peace. I returned to street. Catherine's to find the building transformed, not just repaired, but renovated, with new equipment, new resources, and a security system that would make Fort Knox jealous. Damien's doing, though he never mentioned it directly. My students needed time to heal. We brought in counselors, adjusted schedules, created safe spaces for them to process the trauma they'd experienced. Slowly, carefully, they began to laugh again, to trust again, to believe the world could be good even after seeing its darkness. I split my time between the school and the mansion, neither place feeling quite like home but both feeling necessary. Damien and I circled each other carefully, rebuilding trust that had been shattered and forged in equal measure. He never asked me to play Mrs. Black again, never dragged me to council meetings or asked me to be anything other than myself. And slowly, I began to see the man he was trying to become, still ruthless, still dangerous, but channeling that power toward protection rather than destruction. One evening I found him in his study, looking at architectural plans. "What's this?" "Community center. 2 blocks from your school. Youth programs, after-school activities, job training for parents." He glanced up, almost shy. "I thought if we provide alternatives, give the kids in this neighborhood something to believe in, maybe they won't end up in my world." I studied the plans, my throat tight with emotion. This is perfect. It's a start, a small one. It won't undo the damage I've done, but maybe it'll prevent some future damage. I wrapped my arms around him from behind, resting my cheek against his back. "You're trying. That matters. Does it? Trying doesn't bring back the people I've killed, doesn't erase the sins. No, but it creates new possibilities, new futures. That's all anyone can do, try to be better tomorrow than they were today." He turned in my arms, his hands coming up to frame my face. "You make me want to believe that's possible. Then believe it." He kissed me softly, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, it felt like a beginning rather than an ending. The final bell of the school year rang on a warm June afternoon, and I stood in the doorway of my classroom watching my students stream out, their faces bright with plans for summer. They'd survived. They'd healed. They'd learned that trauma doesn't have to define you, that you can endure the worst and still choose joy. I was locking up when Lily approached, holding something behind her back. "Miss Carter? I wanted to give you something." She held out a single red rose, its stem wrapped in a silk ribbon. Tied to the ribbon was a small charm, a crest I recognized immediately. "Where did you get this?" "A man was standing by the gate earlier. He said to give it to you and tell you." She scrunched up her face, trying to remember. "Tell you the bells sound better when you're here to hear them." My heart stopped. I looked past her toward the gate, and there, standing in the shadows where the sun couldn't quite reach, was a silhouette I'd recognize anywhere. "Thank you, Lily. Have a wonderful summer." I walked slowly toward the gate, my pulse racing. He stepped into the light as I approached, and I saw that time away had changed him. He looked older somehow, but also lighter, as if he'd set down a weight he'd been carrying too long. "I thought you left," I said when I reached him. "Your men said you were handling business overseas." I was, transferring control of the family operations to my cousin, liquidating certain assets, making sure no one I could trace anything back to you or the school. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, making sure you'd be safe if I never came back. And now? Now I'm free. Or as free as someone with my history can be. No family obligations, no empire to maintain, just a man with too much money and a desire to do something good with what's left of his life. That sounds lonely. It is, unless... He pulled out a small box, not a ring this time, but a key. Unless someone wanted to be lonely with me, I bought a house in the next state over. Small town, good schools, far from my old world. I thought maybe I could teach business ethics at the local college, if they'd have me. Maybe volunteer at the community center we're building. Maybe try to be the man you saw in me instead of the man I was. I took the key, feeling its weight in my palm. What about us? What about our marriage? Still legal, if you want it to be. Or we can annul it and start over, do it right this time. Date like normal people, figure out if what we have is real or just trauma bonding and circumstance. I paused, surprised by my own certainty. I think it's been real for a while now. Terrifyingly, complicatedly real. He pulled me close, and I went willingly, breathing in his familiar scent, expensive cologne, and secrets, but also hope. I love you, Emma Carter. Emma Black. Whoever you want to be. I love you with everything broken in me that you somehow made whole. I love you too. God help me, but I do." He kissed me as the final bell echoed across the playground, as my students laughed their way toward summer, as the world kept turning despite everything we'd survived. When we pulled apart, I looked back at Street Catherine's, its walls repaired, its future secure, its students safe. Then I looked at the man who'd saved it all, who'd become something better because I'd believed he could. "Take me home," I said, and meant both the school and the future we'd build together. "Take me home and show me what redemption looks like." He smiled, real and warm and full of promise, every day for the rest of our lives. We walked away from that schoolyard hand in hand, leaving behind the darkness we'd survived and stepping toward a future neither of us deserved but both of us had earned through blood and choice, and the stubborn belief that people could change. The bell rang again, the first bell of a new beginning, and somewhere in the distance, I swear I heard the sound of children laughing, safe and free and full of hope.